In Europe, we've seen tremendous growth. Our total processing volume has grown 8 times since 2022. So if you think about that, that's doubled for 3 consecutive years. These enterprise businesses really only want one full provider that can provide a unified experience across geographies. Last year, we acquired a company called TransactPay. They are an EMI licensed BIN sponsor for the UK and Europe. When it's combined with a card issuing platform, we can provide, it really enhances our program management capability. One of the key things is the cross-border expansion. So it's really complex to take a card program to a new region, especially when they have their own laws and complexities and compliance regulations. Having one provider that can be your guide and expert, the speed to market across geographical expansions that really helps us to stand out. They can have the scalability and the reliability, they can have the flexibility and the control. Don't operate for the short-term vision of just that one project. Look for a provider that's actually going to support you in the long term for your real growth ambitions as a business over the next 5 to 10 years.
Hello and welcome to the PLS podcast here in London at the Payment Leaders Summit 2026. I'm Masha Cilius. I'm a payments specialist, board advisor and director, and I've been in payments for over 30 years. I'm delighted to be joined today by Richard from Marqeta. Richard, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you very much. So my name is Richard Drury. I head up European sales for Marqeta.
Thank you very much. Well, to get us started, could you tell us a little bit more about Marqeta?
Absolutely. So Marqeta is a modern card issuing platform. So we enable customers to be innovative on our platform, whether that be separate building blocks to be able to stack on top of each other and build unique ways to deliver value to their customers. So last year in 2025, we processed nearly $400 billion on the platform across different industries and different use cases, which we'll dive into a bit later. But effectively, we are the modern processor that enables flexibility, scale, and reliability. So there was a problem in the issuing world previously where the legacy providers just couldn't keep up with the speed of innovation across payments. And Marqeta has spotted that gap and been able to give control and reliability and flexibility back to their customers who can provide it to their end consumers, to really push forward innovation in the card issuing space.
Okay, so it sounds like you are helping kind of more newcomers into the issuing market.
Yeah, so we power companies like neobanks, lenders, buy now pay later companies, expense management platforms, and each of them have different use cases and value that they want to deliver to their customer. But they come to us because we can provide a full stack platform, but they can choose the bits they need. So whether that be, KYC, KYB capability, whether it be bank accounts and money movement technology or simple card issuing platform, then we can package that up how they want and enable them to stack that up to create something truly unique in the market to their customers.
So kind of helping them move with the times, you could say.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the card issuing world has always been quite dominated by legacy providers. But what that means is you have certain restrictions and the speed that you can move at. So with the way we've seen the evolution over the payment industry, it's moving at such a speed, it's quite phenomenal, but it's hard to find the providers that can keep up with that speed and give you the flexibility you need without then sacrificing on something. So we pride ourselves on, nearly 5 nines of availability, the huge scale that I mentioned earlier about the, nearly 400 billion on the platform, gives trust and faith that the platform will stand up to the kind of volumes that they want as they scale their business, but without having to sacrifice the ability to flex and innovate, and have control ultimately over their own program.
Yeah. I mean, over the years of my career, definitely one of the things in the issuing business stood out that replatforming is something that can take 10 years. I remember it's like sales cycle, 10 years. So it means you have to foresee all the features you might need in 10 years' time. So it sounds like you're trying to address that by giving faith to your customers that yes, we will be moving with the times, we will be innovating.
100%. I think that the future proofing when you're selecting a partner is so key. So it's not just about the exact need that you have for that one project and the market you see right now. It's actually in 5 years, 10 years, how big do we want this to be, and what are the markets we're already in? Can we find a provider that can support that market and that market, so that when they move and scale, they don't have to go and find new providers for this little bit or this little bit. They know that we've got a partner that can truly help us scale and provide that full stack service. it's so hard to go and find individual bits, and especially as you expand, if you think about the nuances around or the complexities around legislation and compliance and the little niches within those markets, if you can find a provider that can take away, by providing that expert, take away that pain or the complexity of it, then that really does count for like the speed at which you can scale as well.
Okay. Well, that's interesting you bring this up, because talking about regulation, you recently acquired a company, TransactPay. Would you like to tell me what was the reasoning, I guess, for the acquisition, and what the new company can offer to the customers that it couldn't before?
Absolutely. So last year we acquired a company called TransactPay. They are an EMI licensed BIN sponsor for the UK and Europe. So what that really means when it's combined with a card issuing platform is that we can provide, it really enhances our program management capability. So in the US, we've been doing this for quite a while, but in the UK and the Europe, we didn't offer a full stack program manager capability. So that means that when a customer comes to us in the US and wants to expand into Europe, they can continue on the same platform that they already integrated with Marqeta, but now they can have the license, as a full stack solution. So with that becomes quite a lot of, we just touched on compliance and regulatory aspects. So TransactPay manage all of that stack. So they sit within our business of Marqeta, but actually they are the licensed entity and they will continue to operate in that manner. But it just brings that level of knowledge that they have that fills a gap that we used to have in our offering. So now we have parity with the US and Europe of the types of use cases and offerings that we can have of a full stack program manager.
Okay, so I guess prior to this, to let me understand, your customers would have to have either their own licenses or they'd have to find themselves partners. So now for those that don't have that and they have desire to go out, you're able to offer them end-to-end solution.
Exactly that. So they often had to find piecemeal solutions and maybe they had to go and solve for that part. Now the benefit of TransactPay and what's great is that they kind of mirror what we do in terms of the flexibility that they can offer. So they provide both schemes, so Visa and MasterCard, but they also provide, credit, debit, consumer, commercial. So the scope of what we can offer really mirrors and matches really well with what TransactPay offer.
Okay, well, you've mentioned the US, so you are a US headquartered company. So can you tell us a little bit about the difference, I guess, between your business and how you had to approach the processing in the US versus Europe, and any lessons learned with your venture into Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Europe, we've seen tremendous growth. Our total processing volume has grown 8 times since 2022. So if you think about that, that's doubled for 3 consecutive years. And that's really from the strength of our US capabilities and the use cases where these enterprise customers then wanted to be able to expand into Europe. But we didn't quite have the feature parity with what we do in the US with Europe. So the acquisition that we've just spoken about with TransactPay has really enabled us to do that. But we have customers like Affirm, Klarna, Uber, Coinbase, Western Union, Ramp. So a real mix of use cases. But really what we've learned from Europe and the US is that these enterprise businesses really only want one full provider that can provide a unified experience across geographies. And that's what we've really then focused on building out across Europe. So recently we announced our banking and money movement capability in Europe, which then matches what we already have in the US. So these customers can then have the same experience and the same product tweaked for the localization of the region, but ultimately get a very similar experience whether they're operating in the US or Europe just from Marqeta. So that helps us really stand out as a multi-geography enterprise grade platform that can help those companies scale versus some of the legacy providers that operate solo markets and they do it really well, but actually they don't offer the flexibility for either scaling, expanding, or the ability to build on the platform really quickly and keep up with that sort of real-time responsiveness.
Okay, and presumably your customers from Europe can be enabled with your system as well to do business in the US? Absolutely,
yeah, so it goes vice versa. And that's really our sweet spot. So since the acquisition of TransactPay, the pipeline has been building with those kind of customers that say, that's great, I've developed this solution in Europe, but now I want to expand into the US. and they don't have to go and do that whole market research again. Even when they're exploring, for certain parts within their platform, they come to Marqeta and we can help them on that exploratory journey of tell us what you're looking to build, what value do you want to bring to your customers? And when we understand that end goal, we can really help them to build something quite special in the market.
Okay, but tell me, have you found any European-specific use cases whereby they don't work in the US or something that the European customers are asking for that's totally different, and vice versa? I think we'll just be curious to know how big are the differences are between the markets.
I think there are nuances within the way the markets work. I think one of the use cases that we've seen come through, we recently announced the expansion of Uber. So Uber is a long-standing customer of ours in the US, but actually the idea of a driver card in the UK has been quite new. So in the US, we've had this before where you sort of bank your workers. And for Europe, that's really been a recent expansion for us where we can then offer instant access to their earnings, but provide a bank account, and maybe that's a high yield savings account. Maybe they then get rewards with their spending on their debit card, and that really has been quite a new solution within Europe as we see the growth of embedded finance. So historically, card issuing platforms have been predominantly dominated in the financial sector, so neobanks and some of the other use cases we mentioned, but actually the growth of embedded finance really now has started to bring some of these really cool use cases to the floor, and the trust that they now build through being used to that and the kind of names that you see offering this sort of solution, consumers are really open to getting that from the brands that they trust and interact with every day. And then the brand get a really cool experience where they have multiple touch points all of a sudden with a consumer that they didn't have before. So I think within embedded finance, one of the best things they can do is it's about deepening engagement with their end consumer, and not necessarily about making revenue from a new card program, but actually how do they get to understand their consumer in way more detail and dig into the data. They suddenly get this clearer picture of other things they can then start to offer. And with that existing user base that they have within the region, the cost of acquisition is so much easier and so much lower that it really opens up a lot more markets.
Well, then potentially cements a lot of partnerships, right? Because I'm glad you've mentioned embedded financial services, because this is something I hear a lot of talk about, but it's quite nice to get an illustration, as you talked about the Uber driver's card, for example. Tell me some examples of embedded finance, some new use cases that would be interesting for our audience.
Yeah, I think the term embedded finance is so broad that it's almost a talking point in itself of what does it really mean. So if you strip it back, what it really means is a non-financial institution offering a financial product. Now that can mean or open up a whole world of opportunity where really what the company needs to focus on is what does their user base really need, and is there a gap in them being able to get that from a financial institution. So that could be that they need certain personalized rewards for the way they spend. It might be that they just need deeper engagement with their consumer. But from the consumer side, it might mean that they need easier access to capital. So there are some really good use cases coming out where they're linking to either a buy now, pay later use case or a access to capital or working capital from a business point of view, whereby they can now get that from the brands or tools that they interact with. So there's so many accounting systems and other systems that are really embedded into the way they work today. But actually, if you can then drop in a financial service in that just complements it, it works really well without having to go separately, try and go through the legacy way of applying for credit or access. The embedded bit is where that power then is, because you're just still interacting with the brand that you know and love and do every day, but you're now getting all these extra products that really just operate in what's the word I'm looking for? Really complement the way that they can
synergy.
Yeah, and they just offer a really nice synergy with the solutions they already have.
Well, and it's great. I think talking as consumer, I have to look out for certain products, right? Be that insurance, be that purchase credit, be that buy now, pay later. And I have to build a trust with each new provider. So if my existing provider, with whom I have trust for whatever reason, for credit card, for example, can offer me some other services, I'm definitely interested in that. And I guess on the other side, if you as a card issuer, for example, can offer additional services or lending, that brings you a partnership with a lending company and potentially new revenues.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the biggest innovations that I think we're going to see over the next 10 years is around flexible credentials, which plays nicely into what you've just said. So the idea of flexible credentials is that you have one payment card, but behind it sit a number of different operating models. So if you think about the way we've always operated for the last 10 plus, maybe even more than a decade, it's been your debit card is your debit card, you have a credit card, you have P2P apps, you have buy now, pay later. We did a state of payments report, and it showed that within a 30-day window that 81% had used cash, 79% had used a credit card, 69% had used a debit card, 69% had used a P2P app. So that in itself just highlights the complexity of and the modern way that people interact. They have multiple different types of cards that they like to use for different purchases and spending habits, etc. But they're always been a different card, so your wallet almost starts to get quite big with all these different models or your phone. Whereas actually now what flexible credentials can do is combine those things into a really good use case. So it might be that you have a debit card and a buy now, pay later functionality on one card, and you can set these, you have the flexibility to control your spending within the app, so before the purchase. So you can say, I want these payments for under £50 to be used on my debit card, and I want anything over £50 to be a instalment product, so buy now, pay later. And it's really giving that user control without having to go and get multiple different wallets and use cases, all controlled within one app. And it's enabling, flexible credentials is enabling brands like we've just mentioned within embedded finance to offer this kind of solution, again being innovative and really spotting where did my customers go elsewhere to get these things. Actually, can I now offer this myself and be seen as that innovator for giving my customers what they need. Marqeta was actually the first issuer processor to certify with Visa for their flexible credentials back in 2024. And we've now got 2 live customers in the US, which are Affirm and Klarna. You might have seen the Klarna one card shown, and it has the Visa flexible credentials embedded within it. And now 15% of Klarna's total global processing volume is done on a VFC-enabled card, which is really, quite unique and quite a phenomenal growth figure. So it shows that it's really resonating in the market. And then MasterCard are also launching their flexible credential later this year, and we're looking forward to building that out with them as well.
And I like the idea you're talking about, you're giving customers the control of how and what they spend. And so presumably it could be if I spend a certain amount, then that goes on to credit. If I spend even a larger amount, it goes buy now, pay later, and so forth. So you're somewhat replacing the need for maybe mobile wallets with a more trusted wallet that is consumer specific, and the consumer tailors it rather than you trying to tailor things to consumer tailors it to him or herself.
I think that's exactly it. So it's the tailoring, it's the control that you're giving the user that they like. So the modern world now of how you interact, consumers just want that control over their finances, and they are less loyal as well, so they do typically flip around. So the more you can give them a reason to stick with you and interact via your brand, the stronger that relationship will grow.
Well, and I think that points to loyalty. Again, one of the things I hear often cited by neobanks is that, especially the generation Z, X, what have you, are not loyal at all. They'll go to the next best deal whenever they've been offered it. So having a more sticky service where you're actually starting to grow with them as individuals and offering them suitable products as they get their first job, as they get a mortgage, as they get other financial requirements. That sounds exciting. You've mentioned kind of giving control to the customer. So that leads me to a thought about agentic commerce. I was listening to a few webinars this week on the subject where we talk about how much control one gives. How do where does that go? Where does it progress in terms of acceptance? What's Marqeta doing with agentic commerce? Do you want to tell us a bit more?
Absolutely. I mean, it is the hot topic at the moment, right? You can't go anywhere without seeing it. I think the early moves have actually been more on the merchant and acquiring side, so enabling someone to take a payment. The AI research and the language models that have sort of dominated through, but actually not many people have looked at the issuer side and what can an issuer do to embed agentic commerce within their platform. So I think we will see a much steadier and slower and considered approach to the way agentic commerce comes into that. So, there is a thought that you can have a bot make a purchase directly from your card without having to actually go to the merchant to initiate the transaction at that point. So you can sort of flip it. But Marqeta has always enjoyed being innovative in this solution and being at the forefront of that to help customers build out what they really want to achieve. And the same goes for agentic commerce. So we've built a MCP server, which is effectively an infrastructure layer that enables AI agents to interact with our APIs. So again, it's less Marqeta coming out with this is the use case that will dominate, agentic commerce, but actually just enabling the next wave of innovators and these, powerhouses to actually just innovate themselves but utilize our platform and underpin, we are the ones that will enable them to do that. So I think it will be a much slower shift on the issuer side, but it's a tremendously exciting space. I think the other thing to consider is fraud. So as everything gets a little bit smarter, unfortunately, so does the fraud. And there's a real sticking point between this sort of friction paradox of you want to make it feel secure and safe, but you don't want to slow down and give a really poor customer experience. And there's various stats out there that say, 80% of consumers want more security and they want to make sure that it feels secure, but 40% of consumers will drop out of a transaction if they've had a poor security experience. So maybe their verification has failed or as they go through the payment flow. And all of a sudden they're associating that poor experience with that brand. So it's a really fine margin of how much trust and infrastructure and security do you put in, but ensuring that it's a really flexible, steady and good user experience as well.
Well, and interesting, again, in terms of the consumer requirement, or consumer needs for agentic. I hear a lot of use cases, but some of them sound very far-fetched, right? Some of them are more practical. I'll tell you, from my past, I worked on a project for a very large UK bank where they were looking at that kind of, we know the customers well, so for example, they use us for direct debits for their insurance. Therefore, at some point, we should know they need insurance renewal, and we'll use our platform to help them choose. So it was kind of predecessor to an agent and kind of trying to pop up some offers for them. So I think definitely there's an opportunity in financial services to give consumers, in the same way that I use an agent to book my complicated travel to Peru, for example, I want to use an agent to find me an insurance that covers this, but doesn't cover this and that. So there is going to be a case, but as you're saying, it's probably more cautious because it's a financial decision. It's kind of a more long-term decision than going and buying something, even a trip to Peru. In terms of, have you seen many use cases for the issuers and generally in the financial sector for an AI agent working on behalf of consumer?
Yeah, I think the main one that springs to mind is around operational efficiency. So if you think about the card issuing side, we also then take care of things like disputes and chargebacks. So that's where an AI agent can really learn the patterns that we've seen, but make it a much more trusted and smoother experience for a user. So no one likes hanging on the phone for ages or a poor experience where you're sort of going around in circles on a chat, whereas we have the ability here to make it really, really next generation with AI, agentic commerce, to say, how do we make this experience, again, really smooth for our consumer, that they keep the trust with us, that if there's a problem with their card or they've been defrauded, that they can raise a dispute, and actually that process can happen much quicker than it would have done if it was manual review and sort of human-led. So I think that the quick advances in use cases have been around how do financial institutions make operational efficiencies using agentic commerce versus necessarily diving straight into sort of making a payment on my behalf.
Okay, thank you. You've mentioned fraud with agentic commerce. What does Marqeta do in terms of fraud management and the modules? Do you help your customers kind of to prepare for the new fraud cases?
We do, yeah. So as part of our program management, we offer a fraud solution, which again is really key to the overarching program because it underpins the security of the program, the compliance regulations that you need to make sure you're adhering to. So we have a variety of tools that we can utilize. Either we can run, the disputes for them and take care of that, and again, release resource at their end to free up to what they do best. But we also have a solution that does the fraud screening or automatic, real-time decisioning at the transaction. And we are using AI to enhance that. So things like a machine learning score that isn't necessarily new to fraud and fraud screening, but actually the way you apply AI technology over the top of it can really enhance the how mature the solution really is. So we've
the actual decision in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I guess maybe one of my last questions is really, how do you stand out? As you said, there are legacy players, but there's been a lot of new players as well. How do you stand out in that busy industry?
It's hard. I think one of the key things is the cross-border expansion. So it's really complex to take a card program to a new region, especially when they have their own laws and complexities and compliance regulations. So having one provider that can be your guide and expert to go through that without having to go and do a new integration or find a new provider. So it's the speed to market across geographical expansions that really helps us to stand out across those two main markets, but also keeping the feature parity, the fact that the platform is proven at scale, and you're not then sacrificing onto a new platform for this specific region and having to manage multiple kind of payment stacks. It can be quite a headache. So we remove that complexity for them and make sure we're helping them to expand wherever they need to be.
Okay. So what would you say would be your advice to initial fintech looking for a new processing partner? What to look out for?
I would say that they don't have to make sacrifices. So previously when they were looking for providers, they always had to make a sacrifice, and it was choosing or instead of and, whereas with Marqeta they can choose and, so they can have the scalability and the reliability, they can have the flexibility and the control. Don't operate for the short-term vision of just that one project. Look for a provider that's actually going to support you in the long term for your real growth ambitions as a business over the next 5 to 10 years versus solving for just the here and now. So am I choosing a provider that can really help and handle the scale that I'm going to bring as I grow my business?
Okay, well, thank you for that. That was a great tip, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.